I became the pet of an alien empress, but she doesn't know I understand her language.
I woke to the sensation of silk against my skin and the acrid scent of something unfamiliar, sweet yet metallic, like orchids steeped in iron. My body ached, my head pounded, and as I blinked through the haze clouding my vision, my surroundings sharpened. A cage, not metaphorical, a real, gilded prison. Thin metal bars arched overhead in a perfect dome, their surface rippling with energy, some kind of containment field. They pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum that vibrated against my skull. The floor beneath me was layered with thick, embroidered cushions, each one softer than anything I'd slept on before. I flexed my fingers, pushing myself upright. My body obeyed, sluggish but uninjured. Where the hell am I? Then I remembered. The ambush. I'd been aboard my ship, the Mariner, running what was supposed to be a routine transport job. Nothing illegal, at least not by my standards. But out in the uncharted fringes of space, law was a flexible concept. I'd been making a delivery to a backwater moon when my radar flared. No warning, no time to react. A Zelvari warship had decloaked right on top of me. They hit me with an EMP burst before I could even think about running. My ship went dark, my controls dead. I had tried, in vain, to send out a distress call. Then the airlock had been breached. Flashing lights, shouts in a language I barely had time to process. And then a needle to my neck. Everything had gone black. Now I was here. A slow, measured sound reached my ears, footsteps. I turned my head just as she entered. Tall, poised, a vision of impossible beauty and absolute authority. Her emerald skin shimmered in the dim light, smooth and flawless. Long, obsidian black hair cascaded down her back in waves, adorned with strands of silver threading. Golden eyes, sharp and discerning, flicked over me with a gaze that felt both assessing and amused. She was draped in a dark, translucent gown, the fabric shifting like liquid night over her body. Patterns of constellations I didn't recognize were embroidered in silver thread across her chest and arms. Jewels, subtle but deliberate, adorned her fingers, her collarbones, the pointed tips of her ears. Royalty. Power radiated from her like heat off a sun. She was Zelvari. And not just any Zelvari. The way she carried herself, the effortless command in her movements, the way the others in the room, yes, there were others, lurking in the shadows, kept their heads bowed in her presence. This was their ruler, the Empress. She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over me with the slow, indulgent air of a collector admiring a newly acquired artifact. Then she smiled. "Oh, what an amusing little thing," she said. In perfect Zelvari. A cold prickle ran down my spine. She doesn't know I understand her. Zelvari was a difficult language. Few humans spoke it fluently. But I did. A remnant of an old relationship. An ex-girlfriend who had been obsessed with xenolinguistics. I had learned it on a whim, never expecting it to be useful. Now, that knowledge might be the only advantage I had. So I said nothing. Her smirk deepened. "A fascinating specimen," she mused, stepping even closer. "Humans are so ordinary. But you..." Her golden eyes traced the lines of my face, my shoulders. "You are quite the find." I clenched my jaw, keeping my expression blank. She crouched beside the cage, reaching through the bars. Her fingers, cool and elegant, brushed the edge of my jaw. The touch was light, testing. Her nails, dark and polished, traced the line of my throat before retreating. I didn't react. That seemed to please her. "You understand nothing, do you?" she mused, more to herself than to me. So helpless, so obedient. I held her gaze. She thought I was some dumb, primitive creature. Let her think that. She stood, her sheer gown trailing behind her as she moved to a throne-like seat on the far side of the chamber. It was carved from dark metal, high-backed and imposing. The cushions were the same deep violet as the banners hanging from the walls. She settled into it with the ease of someone born to rule. With a flick of her wrist, a smaller alien, thin, multi-armed, its skin a dull shade of blue-gray, scurried forward, tapping at a floating panel of light. "Ensure he is well fed," the Empress instructed. Cleaned. Groomed. She tilted her head, considering. I want him presentable. I bit down the surge of anger in my chest. Like I was a pet. She leaned her cheek against her palm, her gaze returning to me. I wonder, she murmured, her voice soft, almost contemplative. How long will it take to tame you? I stared back, silent. She thought me ignorant. She thought me weak. Let her. Because if she ruled this place, then her words, her secrets, would fall freely around me. And when the time came, I would not be the one in the cage. The Empress liked to talk. At first, I thought it was arrogance, some need to hear her own voice, to revel in the sound of her authority. But over the next few days, as I played the role of her silent, obedient pet, I realized it was something else entirely. She didn't see me as a person. I was an ornament, an exotic creature to amuse her. And because of that, she spoke freely around me. She would recline on her chaise, swirling a glass of glowing blue liquor, her golden eyes distant. Caver grows bolder, she mused one evening, speaking to one of her advisors. He thinks I don't see his machinations, that I don't hear the whispers. The advisor, a frail, bird-like alien with translucent skin, bowed deeply. Shall we intervene, Your Majesty? She smirked, sipping her drink. No. Let him play his little games. Let him think he is clever. A pause. Then, softly, the moment he reaches for my throne, I will break him. I kept my expression vacant, idly running my fingers over a silk pillow. But inside, I was cataloging every word. Caver, a potential usurper, a coup brewing beneath the surface. Interesting. Being the Empress's new favorite meant I had the run of her private chambers, a sprawling, opulent space that was half throne room, half personal retreat. Towering black columns framed walls draped in violet silk. The ceiling arched high above, set with bioluminescent patterns that mimicked the shifting constellations of her homeworld. Beyond the throne, a glass wall revealed a vast cityscape, a metropolis of towering spires and neon-lit skyways, suspended over an abyss that disappeared into darkness. The city pulsed with life, but it was silent from up here, as if the palace hovered above the concerns of the common. I saw no other humans, no other prisoners. If there were more, they were kept far from me. My days followed a routine. Wake, eat, be dressed in fine but impractical clothing, and then sit at the Empress's feet while she ruled from her throne. Sometimes she ignored me. Other times, she would idly stroke my hair, her touch impersonal but strangely possessive. At night, she would retreat to her quarters. That was when she truly spoke. Not to me, to herself. The first time it happened, I almost missed it. I had been placed, installed, on a velvet chaise near her bed, under the pretense of being a living decoration. She had dismissed her attendants, stripped herself of her elaborate regalia, and sunk onto the bed with a weary sigh. In the dim glow of the palace lights, she looked less like a ruler and more like a woman burdened by a crown too heavy to bear. She spoke softly, more to the shadows than to me. They do not understand, she murmured. To rule is not a privilege. It is a war without end. She exhaled slowly, fingers pressing against her temples. They all wish to take from me. None seek to protect. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind the golden mask of her eyes. Doubt, exhaustion, something almost human. Then, as if remembering herself, she scoffed and rolled on her side, dismissing her own moment of weakness. No matter. Caver will fall. The others will bow. And just like that, the Empress was back. But I had seen the crack in the armor. She wasn't as untouchable as she wanted the world to believe. Days passed. I listened, observed, learned. Then I tested my first boundary. It was evening. The Empress was reclining on a long couch, flipping lazily through a holographic interface. She had summoned no advisors, no servants. The air was quiet. I moved. It was subtle, a shift in posture, the slow stretch of my limbs as I reached for a piece of fruit from a nearby platter. A small rebellion. Her golden eyes flicked to me. A pause. Then she smirked. Interesting, she murmured, setting her interface aside. You are adapting. I took a bite of the fruit, some kind of citrus, tart and sweet. My gaze met hers, steady but not challenging. She leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. I wonder, how much can you truly comprehend? For a moment, I thought she had caught me, that she had seen through my act. Then she chuckled, as if dismissing the thought. She reached forward, brushing a strand of my hair behind my ear. No matter. You amuse me, little human. She rose, stretching languidly. Come, she said, striding toward her private chambers. I tire of courtly matters. Tonight, you will entertain me. I hesitated. Not enough to be noticed, just a fraction of a second. Did she mean conversation? Or something more? She glanced over her shoulder, as if sensing my thoughts. A smirk played on her lips. Relax, pet. I do not break my toys. I forced my muscles to stay loose, my expression neutral. Then, without a word, I followed her. Not because I had no choice, but because piece by piece, I was beginning to understand her. And if I understood her, I could destroy her. Power was a strange thing. It could be wielded like a blade or worn like a shroud, but in the end, it was still just a tool, one that could be turned against its owner. Zyra wielded hers effortlessly. By now, I understood that I was no mere pet to her. I was an experiment, a curiosity, a game she had not yet won. Her attention was both a privilege and a curse. It made me untouchable to the lesser members of her court, yet it placed me under constant scrutiny. The closer I was to her, the closer I was to danger. For weeks I listened. I played my part. I waited. Then I made my first mistake. The first sign of change was subtle. Zyra had always watched me, but now she observed me differently. Not like one watches an amusing creature, but like a predator assessing a rival. The shift came after a war council meeting. I had been kneeling beside her throne, perfectly still, my gaze on the floor as her generals bickered over Kaver's growing forces. They argued about whether he was a fool or a true threat, whether he should be struck down now or allowed to overreach himself. Zyra had listened, unimpressed. Then, after a long silence, she reached out and traced a nail lightly against my jaw. Her generals fell silent. Her touch was feather-light, deliberate. A test. Tell me, little one, she murmured, her voice a slow, indulgent drawl. Do you think Kaver is dangerous? The room tensed. This was a moment designed to humiliate me. A beast in a cage, expected to remain obediently ignorant. I met her gaze, just for a breath, just enough. Then, I let my body relax into her touch. A slow, yielding movement. Submissive, but intentional. She smirked. I had passed. The council resumed their discussion, none the wiser. But Zyra's fingers lingered against my skin for a fraction longer than necessary. She suspected something. That night, she dismissed her attendants early. She stripped herself of her heavy regalia, the weight of her rule left scattered across the room. Jewels abandoned on a low table, the stiff collar of her ceremonial robe undone. In the soft glow of the chamber's floating lanterns, she looked less like an untouchable ruler and more like a woman who had carried the weight of an empire for too long. She poured herself a drink, a deep violet liquid swirled in a glass of black crystal. She took a slow sip, then sat down across from me, golden eyes unreadable. You have been quiet, she said. I remained still. Her lips curved slightly. You are different from the others. A dangerous sentence. I kept my breathing steady. She studied me for a long moment, fingers trailing along the rim of her glass. Most break so easily. A cage, a collar, a command. She tilted her head, considering, but not you. She was watching, always watching. Then her voice softened, and I realized too late that this was the real test. What do you dream of, little human? A simple question, a trap hidden behind silk. A lesser captive might have been caught off guard. They might have stiffened, hesitated, revealed too much. Instead, I let my lips part, let my breath hitch, a flicker of hesitation, a struggle for words that never came. Let her believe I was too simple to answer. Let her believe I was still playing the game she thought she was winning. For a moment, she looked almost disappointed. Then she chuckled, shaking her head as if to dismiss the thought. No matter. She stood, stretching languidly, the fabric of her loose robe shifting like liquid night. Come, she said, striding toward her chambers. I tire of courtly matters. Tonight, you will entertain me. I hesitated, a fraction of a second, not enough to be noticed. She glanced back, smirking as if she could hear the thoughts racing behind my carefully blank expression. Relax, pet. A slow, deliberate pause. I do not break my toys. I force my muscles to stay loose, my expression neutral. Then, without a word, I followed. Not because I had no choice, but because I needed to know how much she suspected. The next morning, something changed. A Zelvari servant entered my quarters, carrying a set of new robes, black, embroidered with silver. Not the garb of a prisoner. Something finer. Something meant to be seen. I stood as he approached. He clicked his mandibles in mild irritation, adjusting the fabric before handing it to me. Her Majesty requests you wear this. Then, softer, almost reluctant, you are fortunate. I tilted my head, feigning ignorance. The servant hesitated. Then, glancing toward the door as if ensuring no one listened, he muttered, "None have lasted this long before." My fingers tightened around the fabric. I had suspected. Now I knew. I was not just a pet. I was a test. She was waiting for me to fail. The others had. And when they did, they were gone. I exhaled slowly, keeping my face blank, and took the robes from his hands. Then, as he turned to leave, I made my second mistake. I spoke. "Thank you," I said, in perfect Zelvari. The servant froze. His eyes widened, not in shock but in fear. For a moment, we stood in silence. Then, without another word, he turned sharply and left, the door sealed behind him. I was alone, and for the first time since I had arrived, I knew I had overplayed my hand. Zyra would find out, and when she did, I would no longer be her favorite. I would be something far, far worse. The moment the door sealed shut, I knew I had erred. It was a small thing, a slip of the tongue, a single word spoken in a language I was never meant to understand. But in the Empress's court, small things could shatter empires. The servant's reaction had told me everything. His rigid stance, the way his mandibles clicked once in alarm before he hurried from the room, moving too fast for someone simply delivering clothing. He had been terrified, not of me, but of what would happen when she found out. And she would. The weight of my mistake pressed against my skull, but I forced my breathing steady. Panicking wouldn't help me now. I had to move. The first thing I did was change. The black robe fit too well. It wasn't a prisoner's garb. It was something meant for court. Its fabric shimmered faintly, embroidered with silver threads that traced patterns resembling constellations. A statement piece. An introduction. She was preparing to show me off. The realization sent a ripple of unease through me. I had expected scrutiny. I had prepared for her tests, her mind games, the slow tightening of the noose around my neck. But if she was making me visible, then something had changed. I had become something else in her eyes. And that could be far more dangerous than simply being her captive. The summons came sooner than I expected. 2 guards entered, their weapons holstered but hands resting lightly against their hilts. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. I followed them through the twisting corridors of the palace, each hallway carved from smooth black stone that pulsed with faint veins of violet light. The energy in the walls hummed beneath my fingertips as I brushed against them, a power source embedded deep within the structure, breathing like a living thing. No visible defenses, no patrols. Yet I knew this place was a fortress, a cage without bars. The throne room doors loomed ahead, massive and ornate, their surface etched with ancient symbols. They parted without a sound, revealing the grand chamber beyond. And at its center, Zyra lounged in her throne, draped in dark silks, golden eyes unreadable. The weight of the room pressed down on me, heavy with expectation. She was alone, no advisors, no guards, just us. I exhaled slowly. This was not an execution, not yet. I stepped forward and knelt as expected. A deliberate act, a choice. Silence stretched between us. Then she laughed. Not cruelly, not sharply, Softly, as if I had done something amusing, she rose with lazy grace, descending the short steps of her throne until she stood before me. "I hear you spoke today," she murmured. A statement, not a question. I lifted my head slightly, feigning confusion. Her fingers brushed my chin, tilting my face toward hers. "Such a fascinating little deception," she mused, as if speaking to herself. "How long have you understood me, I wonder?" I forced my body to remain relaxed beneath her touch, my expression carefully blank. She studied me for a long moment, then sighed. "No answer?" "Of course not." She turned, moving toward the edge of the chamber where a vast window overlooked the sprawling city below. The lights of the metropolis stretched into the horizon, flickering like dying stars. "Do you know what I find most disappointing about power?" she asked, her voice smooth, measured. "The isolation." I said nothing. She continued as if I had. "No one speaks freely in my presence. They tell me what they think I wish to hear. They kneel, they obey, they fear." She exhaled, fingers tapping idly against the glass. "It makes them predictable." She turned back to me, but a smirk played at her lips. "You have been hiding." A beat of silence. Then she stepped forward, circling me like a predator assessing whether its prey was worth the chase. "You could have revealed yourself the first time you heard my language." She tilted her head. "You could have begged for mercy." Her hand brushed over my shoulder, light as silk. "But you did not." Another pause. "Why?" A single word, a command wrapped in curiosity. I met her gaze, allowing something flicker across my face. Not fear, calculation. Then for the first time, I spoke, because I wanted to listen. The words hung between us, sharp as a blade. Her golden eyes darkened with intrigue. A slow, knowing smile curled her lips. She did not punish me. She did not call her guards or demand I be thrown back into confinement. Instead, she did something far worse. She laughed. It was soft at first, then richer, as if I had just handed her the most exquisite puzzle. "Oh, I knew you were different," she murmured, stepping closer. "But this—" She reached out, tracing the collar of my robe, adjusting it as if presenting me, not discarding me. "How bold!" She turned sharply, moving toward a small table where a bottle of dark amber liquid sat waiting. She poured 2 glasses, then glanced back at me. "Come," she said, a casual command. "Sit." I hesitated. A trap. It had to be. But I had played my hand. Refusing would show weakness. So I rose, stepping toward her. She handed me the glass, her fingers brushing against mine for the briefest moment. Then she sat, stretching one leg over the other, watching me like something newly discovered. "You intrigue me," she admitted, swirling the drink in her hand. "I should have killed you for the deception." I took a slow sip. The drink burned, smoky and rich. "Yet you haven't," I said. She smirked. "Not yet." Silence settled between us. A shift had taken place, fragile but real. I was no longer merely a pet. But I was not her equal. "Not yet." She tapped her glass thoughtfully, then murmured, "Perhaps you are wasted as a simple decoration." A pause. Then, with a slow, indulgent smile, "Perhaps it is time you became something more." The air between us crackled with something unspoken. I had stepped out of one game and into another. And this time, the stakes were far higher. There was a shift in the air that night. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. The moment I stepped into the grand hall at Zyra's side, I could feel it, the weight of countless gazes pressing against me. Not the idle curiosity I had grown accustomed to, nor the faint amusement of nobles who saw me as nothing more than a passing novelty. No, this was different. This was calculation. They were reassessing me. What had changed? The answer stood beside me, golden eyes gleaming with a secret only she knew. Zyra. She had played this game for years, perhaps decades. She understood power not as something blunt, but as a weapon honed to its sharpest edge. And now, she had placed me on the board, not as a piece to be discarded, as something far more dangerous. The hall was vast, lined with towering pillars carved from obsidian stone, their surfaces etched with shifting patterns of violet light. The ceiling arched high above, suspended with floating lanterns that pulsed like distant stars. The guests, nobles, warlords, politicians, moved like predators through the space, their silken robes whispering against the marble floors. It was a court of predators, and tonight, I had been invited to the hunt. I was dressed for it too. Gone were the simple garments of a captive. In their place, I wore deep black robes, embroidered with silver threading, a mark of status, of belonging. The fabric clung to me like a second skin, designed not for comfort but for impact. The whispers began the moment I entered. Who is he? Why is he standing beside her? Is this a new game? A new weapon? Zyra let them talk. Let them wonder. Then, with deliberate grace, she turned to me and handed me a glass of deep amber liquid. A silent command. A test. I accepted without hesitation. She smirked. Approval. The room watched, waiting for the next move. She made it for them. Enjoy yourself, pet, she murmured, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. Learn something. Then she turned away, leaving me alone, or rather unleashing me. They came to me in waves, some out of curiosity, some out of arrogance, some because they wanted to see what made me so special. A silver-skinned noble approached first, his expression carefully measured. He swirled the wine in his glass, studying me as if I were an exotic creature displayed for his amusement. You must be quite the entertainment, he mused, for her to keep you this long. I smiled slightly. You must be quite the disappointment, to be speaking to me instead of her. His grip on his glass tightened just enough to crack the surface. He left without another word. Others followed, some more subtle, some more direct. But they all circled the same unspoken question. Why are you still alive? Why has she not broken you? Why has she not discarded you? The answer, I suspected, was something even Zyra herself had not fully decided. And that made me dangerous. Zyra's presence dominated the room, but I had learned to watch her between the moments. The way her fingers tapped idly against the stem of her glass when a particular noble spoke. The slight narrowing of her golden eyes when a general hesitated before answering her. And, most importantly, the moment her gaze flickered. It was brief, a fraction of a second, but I caught it. Her attention had shifted, just slightly, toward a dark-cloaked figure at the far end of the room. He was speaking to another noble, his voice low, his movements careful. Too careful. Then a passing of hands. A whisper. A glance. A nod. A deal. A conspiracy. And Zyra had not seen it. But I had. I turned, making my way back toward her, keeping my movements unhurried. When I reached her side, she glanced at me, raising a single brow. I leaned in slightly, my voice low. The man in the red cloak. He just received something from your general. For the first time that night, Zyra stilled. It was brief, a fraction of hesitation, the smallest tell. Then, smoothly, she smiled. I see. She turned her gaze toward the man in question. Not directly, not noticeably, but I saw the way her fingers tightened against her glass. She had not expected this, which meant one thing. There was a traitor in her court. And now, she knew it. A slow, deliberate smirk curled her lips. Well, she murmured, setting her glass aside. I suppose the night is not over after all. Then she turned to me, golden eyes sharp. You have just become very useful, little human. And I understood. I was no longer playing the game. I had just become a piece on the board. When the gathering ended, Zyra summoned me to her private chambers. She was silent at first, pouring herself a drink, the sound of liquid filling the glass the only noise between us. Then she turned, studying me with a gaze I could not quite read. You saw something I did not, she said finally. I inclined my head. Yes. A pause. Then she smirked. And yet, you told me. I met her gaze. Would you have preferred I didn't? A low, thoughtful hum. She took a slow sip, then stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of her presence curled around me like silk. You are not afraid of me, she observed. It wasn't a question. No, I said simply. Another pause. Then, softly, good. She set her glass down and turned away, as if arriving at some unseen decision. You are no longer a pet, she said. The words settled over the room like the final stroke of a blade. I waited. She glanced over her shoulder, smirking. Now, let us see what you can truly do. And just like that, the game changed again. Power was a game, and I had been playing it long before I knew the rules. The night I pointed out the traitor, everything changed. Zyra had seen me as an amusement, then a curiosity, then an asset. But now, I was a threat. Not to her throne. Not yet. But to the way things had always been. She had placed me on the board, but she hadn't expected me to start moving the pieces. The betrayal was unfolding faster than Zyra had anticipated. By the time her spies confirmed the traitor's identity, General Saris, one of her longest-serving commanders, it was already too late to contain it. Kaver had made his move. The palace had gone silent, the kind of quiet that signaled something worse than war. The staff avoided eye contact. The guards stiffened at every shadow. The court was waiting to see which way the blade would fall. So was I. I had no intention of dying in this palace, no matter how fine the silks or gilded the cage. But escape wasn't an option. Not yet. I had spent too long listening, learning, waiting, and now the Empress herself was about to be backed into a corner. And that meant she needed me. The attack came at dusk. It wasn't an outright assault. Kaver was too clever for that. His men were already inside, scattered among the palace ranks, waiting for the signal. It came in the form of a single explosion, a small detonation, just enough to shake the throne room. Panic. A moment of hesitation. That was all it took. Guards turned on each other. Courtiers fled. And in the center of it all, Zyra remained perfectly still. She didn't run. She didn't bark orders. She simply watched, a queen assessing the battlefield before making her move. Then her golden gaze flicked to me. "Stay close," she said. Not a command, a warning. And then the doors burst open. Kaver entered like he had already won. Draped in ceremonial armor, flanked by his most loyal warriors, he moved with the arrogance of a man who believed himself victorious. His gaze swept over the carnage, landing on Zyra with something almost like amusement. "Majesty," he drawled. "You should have stepped aside when you had the chance." Zyra smirked. "And let you rule?" Kaver chuckled. "You are outnumbered. Your generals have abandoned you. Even now, your forces hesitate. They know this is over." Silence. Then, Zyra exhaled slowly, like a woman forced to entertain a particularly dull conversation. "I tire of this," she murmured. And then she moved. One moment, she was still. The next, she was upon them, blades igniting in her hands, twin arcs of violet energy cutting through the air. The first soldier barely had time to raise his weapon before she severed his arm at the elbow. The second died before he could scream. Chaos erupted. Kaver's men surged forward, but Zyra was faster. She wove through them like a force of nature, her movements effortless, practiced. This was not a ruler sitting comfortably on a throne. This was a warrior who had taken her empire by blood and fire. But even she couldn't fight them all. More soldiers flooded the chamber, pushing her back. Even she was not invincible. And then I saw it, the moment Kaver reached for his weapon. A pulse gun, a coward's weapon. He was going to shoot her in the back. I didn't think. I moved. My body reacted before my mind caught up, before I could weigh the consequences. I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest fallen soldier's blade, and threw it with everything I had. The blade struck true. Kaver cried out, clutching his arm, the pulse gun tumbling from his grip. Zyra turned, saw what I had done, and in that moment, I saw her make a choice. Not to leave me behind, not to use me as a distraction, but to trust me. "Stay with me," she ordered. And this time, I believed her. The battle didn't last much longer. With Kaver wounded and Zyra still standing, the tide turned swiftly. The guards who had hesitated now saw where power truly lay, and they made their choice. Loyalists fell upon the rebels, cutting them down without mercy. Kaver was dragged before the throne, bleeding, furious. Zyra stood over him, golden eyes unreadable. "You always were ambitious," she mused. Kaver spat blood. "This isn't over." Zyra smiled. "Oh, it is." Then, without ceremony, She drove her blade through his heart. The throne room was silent. The bodies had been cleared, the blood scrubbed from the marble. The court had returned, carefully composed, as if nothing had happened. Zyra sat upon her throne, one leg crossed over the other, watching me. I stood before her, no longer dressed as a pet, no longer kneeling. We both knew what came next. "You saved my life," she said finally. I shrugged. "You needed the help." She smirked. So modest. A pause. Then softer. "And now what, little human?" I met her gaze. She had power. She had her throne. And me? I could leave. I had played my part. I had survived. But something in her expression told me she wasn't expecting that. She was waiting. Not to command. Not to demand. But to offer. The choice for the first time was mine. I exhaled, slow and steady. Then I smiled. "I think I'd like to see what happens next." Zyra's golden eyes gleamed. "Good," she murmured. "So would I." And just like that, the game began anew. 2 weeks had passed since Kaver's death. The rebellion had died with him. His allies, those who hadn't fled or begged for mercy, were executed swiftly. The Zelvari did not believe in dragging out punishment. Betrayal demanded blood, and Zyra had spilled it without hesitation. The empire was hers again, firmly and unquestionably. And yet, the palace still whispered. Not about Kaver, not about his failed coup. About me. They had seen me rise from nothing. From a caged pet to something standing at the Empress's side. Some called it manipulation. Others feared it was something worse. Control. Influence. Love. None of them knew the truth. Because I didn't know the truth. Not yet. I was no longer kept in a gilded cage. I had been given chambers of my own. Expansive, luxurious, yet strangely impersonal. A place of power, but not of belonging. I was allowed to move freely now, and yet every step felt like a decision I had not yet made. Then, one evening, Zyra summoned me. The throne room was empty when I arrived. The courtiers had been dismissed, the guards absent. Only she remained, standing by the vast window that overlooked her city. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, an empire of lights and towering spires. A kingdom carved from war and ambition. She didn't turn as I approached. "I should reward you," she said, "for saving my life." I leaned against one of the pillars. "You already did. You let me live." She smirked. "Is that all you want?" I said nothing. Zyra finally turned to face me. She was not dressed in royal regalia tonight. No crown, no heavy jewels. Just a simple, elegant robe, black with silver embroidery. Her long dark hair flowing freely down her back. She looked less like an untouchable ruler and more like a woman who had spent too long fighting for her place in the world. And she was watching me with something unreadable in her golden eyes. "You could leave," she said. The words hung between us, soft and sharp at once. "I know," I admitted. "You have no debts here. No chains. If you wish, I will grant you a ship. Credits. Safe passage beyond my borders." A pause. Then, more carefully, "Do you wish to leave?" I studied her, searching for something in her expression. Some flicker of expectation. Some sign that she already knew my answer. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty. Zyra was never uncertain. She commanded, dictated, ruled. But now, she was giving me a choice. A real choice. And for a long moment, I didn't know what to do with it. I used to think about escape every day, I admitted. Back when I was your pet. She didn't flinch at the word. I took a slow breath, looking past her toward the vast city below. But then I started paying attention. To your enemies. Your court. You. I turned back to her. And I realized something. She arched a brow. "Oh." I stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint glow of the city lights reflected in her irises. "You were never my captor," I said. "Not really." Her smirk faltered. "If you wanted me broken, I would be," I continued. "If you wanted me dead, I'd be in the ground. But you didn't break me, and you didn't kill me." A pause. "Because you never wanted to." Silence stretched between us. Then, finally, she exhaled, shaking her head. You are far too clever for your own good. I smirked. That's why you like me. She chuckled, but there was something softer behind it. Then she reached out, not in command, not in dominance, but as an offering. Her fingers brushed against mine, light, uncertain. The most powerful woman in the empire. And yet, in this moment, she was waiting for me. Waiting for my choice. I could leave. She would let me go, no tricks, no punishment. I could take my freedom, leave this world behind, and never look back. Or I could stay. Not as a prisoner. Not as a pet. But as something more. I looked at her, this woman who had once been my captor, then my adversary, then something I had no words for. And in her gaze, I saw something I had never expected. A future. My fingers curled around hers. Her breath hitched just slightly. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile. And just like that, the game was over. And something new had begun. They still whispered about me in the court. The human who had been a pet. The human who had saved the Empress. The human who now stood beside her, no longer kneeling, no longer caged. But the whispers didn't matter. Zyra ruled her empire as she always had. With fire, with steel, with unshakable will. And I ruled nothing. Commanded no armies, held no titles. But I stood at her side as her equal. And in the end, that was more than enough.